we get closer every day to the birth of our first child. Just the other day, Allison had her baby, and it shouldn't be too much longer before we have ours. And the thing about a baby is that they're constantly changing. Our baby's not the same today as it was yesterday, and it's not the same today as it'll be tomorrow. And throughout their life, our baby will change, just as we do, in little ways every single day. I know it's often minor things. Our fingernails grow, our hair grows. We have to cut our hair and our nails. But we also change in many ways. We aren't born believing in Jesus Christ. We're not born believing in God. It's something that we have to learn. It's a trust we have to have. And it's something for each and every one of us to have. And our goal, to draw as many people as we can to God. For some people, it's a challenge. For many people, it's a challenge. For more, it's a bigger one. Sometimes it can be challenging when you're in a tough situation, but at those times, it's a lot easier for some people to call out to God because they need help. Here we have in Exodus chapter 2, verse 23, it says, "During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them." God, unlike us, doesn't change. God is the same as he was with Abraham, as he was with Isaac, as he was with Jacob, as he was with Moses, as he is with us today. God is constant. And God keeps his promises. He didn't just come up to Abraham and like we talked about a few weeks ago in the covenant he made, say, you're going to have a child, and then you're going to have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as on the sands and the seashore, and just say, oh well. He didn't say, you'll for 400 years service in Egypt as slaves, and then I will call you out. He didn't forget about that. Remember, he was looking at a bigger picture. It's not just the God of Israel. He was the God of the whole world. As any history buff will tell you, everything affects everything else. What happens clear over across the other side of the world does affect what happens here today. We may not be able to see it as well today as we'll be able to see it in 50 years, but it does. Everything affects everything else. And so, something had to happen in those 10 nations that God had talked about to Abraham, that they will have that possession of all that land. And as we look farther in this, we'll find that that list of 10 has shrunken to 6. There's already been a change in the region. 4 of those nations are no longer in power. Times have changed in 400 years. Just think about our recent history. If you look at a map from 1930, how many countries are on there that aren't on there today? If you look at a map from 1950, how many countries were different between the 1930 and 1950 map? And again, 1970 and 1990 and 2010, all those maps are going to have different boundaries in different places. Even the United States. We started in 1930, it's not the same as it is now. We gained a couple states in that time. Just a little bit different. And the rest of the world, some days it seems like if you wait a week, you just have to see who's going to be in power in a certain country. Things are constantly shifting and constantly changing. But God keeps his promises. He made a specific covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And with each one of them, spoke with them and made promises to them. And the stage was set. The promises were to be fulfilled. And now at this point, the people of Israel were ready to call out to God. Not only did the people in the other countries in Canaan have to be ready to be judged, to be vomited out, if you remember from the passage, to be vomited out of the land, the people of Israel also had to be ready to cry out to God. They had to have enough. And their home was ready and waiting for them. All they had to do was go there. As you know, looking later, it's not quite that easy, but it was time for them to go. It was time for them to leave the comfort of Egypt. It's so ironic when you look at this passage that later on they talk about the comforts of Egypt, how wonderful it was, when you see here how terrible it was for them at this time. God's promises will be fulfilled. God's promises will always be fulfilled. We also know that God knows who to use. When He calls you, as most people who are called by God, their first answer will be, what? Why me? Just think about this. In this passage in Exodus, Moses is just tending the flocks. And he's tending the flocks a long ways away from Midian. He crossed the desert, and so that shows that he had been trusted by his family, that who he was taking care of, his father-in-law Jethro's animals. That was their whole livelihood, were those sheep. But he was just doing his everyday thing. He was tending the flocks. He was at the mountain, had brought him to the pasture land there, and he saw something amazing. He saw something that you wouldn't expect to see. He saw a bush burning, but not consumed. Can you imagine just going about your normal day and seeing something amazing? Like if you have a fish tank in your office and all the glass falls off and the water doesn't fall out. Think that would get your attention?
Yes.
Or if you walked in and somebody had knocked something off a table and the pencils were suspended in the air. Your whole class would be amazed if you were in a school. It's just floating there. That would grab your attention. And then imagine if that pencil floating there would start talking to you. That would really grab your attention. It's one of those things that you couldn't not look at. You know, it's like when you drive down the road and a lot of times you get stuck in traffic and you wonder why. When you get to the head of the line and you finally get to the front and you look, then you know why. It's because everybody else had to look. Everybody else had to see. Everybody else had a rubberneck to see what was going on. And most of the time, in my case, by the time I'm to the front of the line, there's nothing to look at anyway. Nothing. I don't know what happened. The trucks were gone. Why is the traffic still going slow? But it was something that Moses had to look at. The bush being on fire yet not being consumed. It's not something we would expect. Just like a pencil floating in there. That's not supposed to happen. The water's supposed to fall out of the fish bowl if there's no glass. And your pencil's not supposed to speak to you. But here's the thing. It's not just that the pencil would have spoken to him or the fish would have spoken to him. It's that he responded. See, last week we talked to the kids about the line of superstars, the Hall of Fame, and how you would go about what happened to them without a faith in God. And the first response to that would be, if a bush spoke to the average person, they wouldn't say, "Here I am," then run away.